But here we are in 2008, where the books are telling us, the UNICEF report is putting it at, as I said, 35 deaths per 1,000 for under 5, and for the infants, 31 deaths, Mr. Speaker. So how can the minister boast about building families? The reality is that families have been disintegrating under the PNM. Poverty, crime, sabotage of the traditional unit. What does government do with the money now? I've told you about the propaganda. There's political patronage. There's HDC and URP and CPEP and OJT and the state boards and the top public service positions going to friends and families and supporters regardless of skill. And this is where, in response to the Inter-American Convention Against Corruption, Mr. Speaker, government is obliged to fill out questionnaires on a number of things dealing with corruption. One of those is, what are the hiring practices of the government? The 2007 response to the questionnaire, which is the last one I was able to find on the net. I don't know if any has been done after 2007, but that one places persons employed by government on contract and shows that number to be expanding from 801 in 2001, the UNC last year, to 5,289 in 2006. Now, Mr. Speaker, that's only up to 2006, because we do not have the statistics thereafter, but I'm sure they have climbed. And I can demonstrate they have climbed, or people are being paid more, because again, when we look at the estimates, we will see where the money is going. In that same response, Mr. Speaker, the government indicated that some areas, such as for this kind of employment, advisors, prosecutors, consultants, public relations, communications, policing, and they said that employment is often not preceded by advertisements. This is our own government. Our own government admitting in their report, in that questionnaire to the IACC, that employment is not often preceded by advertisements and the listing of qualifying criteria and expected duties. So how do you find these people? How are you hiring them, Mr. Speaker? And that's why we keep saying that it's for the PNM boys and girls and their friends and family. I talked earlier about the sweethearts with it, hey. And so government has been bypassing the Public Service Commission. Let's get the numbers now. On contract employment and contracted service has risen astronomically, Mr. Speaker. Again, from 2002 to end 2010, this government would have spent $11 billion on contract employment. And there is no oversight of this. There is no proper hiring and firing criteria. Again, it is what I spoke of earlier, that you do not have a security of tenure, so you must do the bidding of your masters. You must do what they say. You cannot have independent thought and action, Mr. Speaker, because you're on a string on a contract and you can be fired at any moment. And so ministries and departments, they had 1 to 57, heads 1 to 57, $4 billion on contract employment, Mr. Speaker, and $3.9 billion on other contracting services. The statutory boards, again, Mr. Speaker, have spent quite a lot of money on contracting services, contract employment. The Ministry of National Security is the second highest on the list of contract employment. So they're first highest, and in the top 3, we talked about the propaganda vote, and here in contract employment. I really would like that minister, when he speaks, to tell us, what are you hiring these people on contract to do? What? Why are you spending, for example, in fiscal 2010, you want $230 million to be spent on contract employment. You spent $200 million, Mr. Speaker. And the estimates go from 2010 estimates, 40.9 million, up from 34.9 million in 2009. What is all this money being spent for all these years, over $200 million? Who are you contracting? And how are they contracted? How much are they being paid? And what do they do when crime is still at the situation it is in? Education is very high on this list, and in fact is the highest, but I do understand what has happened in education. The teachers were hired on contract when we had opened up all the new schools, and the Teaching Service Commission could not have processed the applications in time for the opening of schools. So we began taking them on contract. But Mr. Speaker, with due respect, this is what, 9 years later? These people have no security of tenure too. They have no benefits of a person who would be employed in the teaching service. I have heard them complain, I've seen their letters, I've seen their phone calls and so on. They want to be regularized too. So yes, you took them because there was a reason at that time, but something has to be done to regularize them. So we come now, Mr. Speaker, having done part of the environmental scan, and my colleagues will do more, I'm sure. I just want to spend a minute on output budgeting and input budgeting before I turn to the property taxes, because I really want to spend some time on that. It impacts upon the whole landlord reform package that we passed in this Parliament. I need to speak about that. The Minister spoke about output budgeting, really. But her whole boast contradicted her own commitments, Mr. Speaker. Instead of output budgeting, that is assessing performance and outcomes, and that is what is in the Vision 2020 plan, assessing performance by outcomes, the Minister kept speaking about how much money the government has spent. That is not output budgeting. That is input budgeting, how much money you are putting. And so it is a contradiction in terms. The rhetoric of output budgeting was in the budget speech, but nothing is in place for doing output budgeting and assessing the performance in terms of outcomes. Mr. Speaker, we can look, for example, what we are getting for our money today. Under the PNM, the cost of the Brian Lara Cricket Stadium Academy, that is equivalent to an entire airport under the UNC. Entire airport. In fact, the World Travel Awards, Caribbean leading airport for customer service and so on, has given Trinidad and Tobago an award. In 2007, the Piarco International Airport was designated, Mr. Speaker, and given that award by the WTA. And so, top performing airport in the Caribbean for airport service, Mr. Speaker. That is the UNC's legacy to this country, that airport. And no amount of talk about it. They fly through it, the frequent flyers are passing through it every day. I come now to the taxation, because this is a matter of grave concern for all of us. You will recall, Mr. Speaker, the Americans have spoken always about no taxation without representation. And, you know, we really need to take a stand against this taxation. I have seen one of our colleagues, fellow attorney, Prakash Ramada, has been talking about no taxation without representation. And so he has asked, and he calls, we must take a stand, we must show we care, and he's called for people to wear black on Friday, Mr. Speaker. People are incensed by the taxation measures. And if you remember, Mr. Speaker, under the UNC budgets, they were usually like, they were short speeches, you know. But you recall, under the PNM, anytime there was a budget, you remember long ago, there used to be, everyone used to be scared. They don't know what's going up. Cars line up in the gas station because they think taxes going up, gas going up, people buying cigarettes and alcohol and talking up. Well, we've come back to those days because, as a fellow Stephen Kangali puts it, he says, taxation is endemic in the DNA of the PNM, Mr. Speaker. And they've brought back all these taxes to what? To support the high-flying lifestyle they've become accustomed to. The motor vehicle taxes, the minister very upfront and personal told us, she itemized a 33% increase on driver's license, 50% for the increases in motor vehicle tax on used vehicles. But the minister was not forthcoming in that manner about the other fees and duties. And I don't think anyone has been paying attention. But the minister said there will be a 75% increase in all other fees and duties on the deferred schedule of the Motor Vehicle and Road Traffic Act. And Mr. Speaker, nothing is wrong with it because you don't have to pay it. And so, Mr. Speaker, when you look at the deferred schedule of the Motor Vehicle and Road Traffic Act, you will see at least 20 transactions, all of which have now been increased by 75%. All of which have been increased. Then we come to look at the property taxes. And I want to say, let us forget at the start the nonsensical statement made by the minister that the tax is not a tax on you, it's a tax on your property. Because what does that mean? The property will go and pay the tax, Mr. Speaker? The property is a tax on the citizens of this country. The reality is it will bring a significant increase in the cost of living. It will have a devastating ripple effect on the entire population. None shall escape, Mr. Speaker. Whether you're a property owner, whether you're a tenant, and even if you're a squatter, Mr. Speaker, you will have to pay these increased, you'll bear the burden. Let's look at the residential properties first of all. Any increased tax on residential properties will result in property owners will have to find more money to pay their taxes. Higher rent for poor people who cannot afford a home. I understand you're asking about the squatters. You know, there is a law that has regularized squatters and you cannot break down their homes. There is a law in this country passed in the year 2000. Squatters and their homes are protected by the law of Trinidad and Tobago. And when you are paying taxes, you pay, yes, before a certain date, before the 1st of January 1998. Those we will deal with. But she's making the point that squatters, no, that was not the issue. The member was fussing that squatters have to pay the property tax. I'm saying yes, because you pay properties on houses as well as on land. There too, it's house and land, you know, Mr. Speaker. I think as a lawyer you know that.